You are in seat 23A, somewhere over the Atlantic, when the plane drops. A dip, a shudder, the seatbelt sign blinking on with its soft chime. A knot rises in your throat. Your hand finds the armrest and grips it quietly so the stranger next to you does not notice. And underneath the calm face you are wearing, a very old part of your brain is asking a very simple question. What are the odds that this is how it ends? You have heard the reassurances 100 times, but you have never actually seen the number. Tonight, that moment has come, and it is far stranger than you expect. Everyone knows the phrase, flying is the safest way to travel. It gets repeated at every departure gate, in every nervous conversation, usually by someone who has already said a silent goodbye to the people they love. And here is the thing. The phrase is true, but it is true in a way almost nobody appreciates. It is not that flying is a little safer than driving. It is not even 10 times safer. The gap is so wide that your intuition simply refuses to process it. So consider one fact and hold on to it for the rest of this story. Statistically, the most dangerous part of your journey today ended in the parking garage. The taxi ride to the airport, 20 minutes of ordinary traffic, a driver glancing at his phone at a red light, a truck merging without signaling, carried more mortal risk than the 8 hours you were about to spend 7 miles above the ocean. Your instincts insist this is backwards. The ground feels safe. The sky feels like trespassing. So why is the feeling so wrong? And how wrong is it exactly? Arnold Barnett, a statistician at MIT, has been tracking aviation death rates since the 1970s. Not delays, not lost luggage, not near misses, one number only. The chance that a passenger who boards a flight does not survive it. When he started, back in the era of smoking sections and cockpit doors that hung open in cruise, the answer was roughly one death for every 350,000 boardings. Then the number began to move. By the 1990s, 1 in over a million. By the 2000s, 1 in several million. And for the most recent years he measured it, settled near 1 in 14 million. Sit with that for a second. A number that size means nothing to a human brain, so Barnett translated it into time. If you boarded a random flight every single day, breakfast, taxi, takeoff, landing, hotel, repeat, you could keep that up on average for about 25,000 years before your number came up. 25,000 years ago, your ancestors were painting mammoths on cave walls by firelight. That is the time scale of the risk you take by stepping on board. Set that next to the things you never think about at all. Over a lifetime, a person is far more likely to be killed by a lightning strike than to die on any single flight. And nobody cancels a picnic over the forecast. You are more likely to choke to death at dinner tonight than to go down in the plane you board tomorrow. More likely to drown in your own bathtub. More likely to be killed by a bee sting. These are the quiet, unglamorous ways the world actually takes people. How did a machine made of 400 tons of metal and jet fuel become that safe? The answer lives in a small orange box. Every commercial aircraft carries flight recorders, armored, fireproof, built to survive impacts that nothing else on board survives. Their whole purpose is to reconstruct what happened when there is no one left to tell it. When a crash happens anywhere in the world, investigators spend months, sometimes years, reconstructing the event down to the second. Every switch, every word in the cockpit, every degree of pitch. And then the lesson gets written into the global system. A checklist changes. A part is redesigned. A training program adds one more drill for every airline, everywhere. Aviation is the only form of travel where a disaster on one side of the planet makes your flight on the other side safer. The results are visible now. In 2017, roughly 4 billion passengers flew on commercial jets worldwide. And the number of them who died in a passenger jet crash was 0. 4 billion boardings, and not a single one ended in loss. On an ordinary day, more than 100,000 flights take off and land. And the routine holds so completely that we only notice the exceptions. Which raises the real question. Why does none of this reassure you at 37,000 feet? Because your brain does not calculate risk, it remembers stories. In the 1970s, two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, showed that people judge how likely something is by how easily an example comes to mind. They called it the availability heuristic, and it quietly runs your entire sense of danger. Think about what happens when a plane goes down. Within an hour, the footage is everywhere. The column of smoke, the scattered debris, the faces at the arrivals gate. You see it replayed for days. The images are vivid, emotional, unforgettable, which means they are always available, sitting right at the front of your memory when the cabin shutters. Now think about what you saw on the news this morning about car crashes. Nothing. In America alone, roughly 40,000 people die on the roads every year, more than 100 every single day, and it almost never makes the national news. Not because it does not matter, because it is too common to be news. And here is where it gets stranger. That is the whole trick inverted. A plane crash is broadcast around the world precisely because it almost never happens. Your fear is built from the coverage, and the coverage exists because the event is rare. The more you hear about plane crashes, the safer flying actually is. That would just be an interesting quirk of psychology, except that this fear has a body count of its own. After September 11th, 2001, millions of Americans looked at airplanes and decided they would rather drive. Highways filled with people who would normally have flown. Families crossing 3 states by car. Salesmen doing 10-hour hauls through the night. A German risk researcher named Gerd Gigerenzer later counted what happened next. In the 12 months after the attacks, road deaths in America rose by roughly 1,600 people beyond the usual toll. 1,600, more than the total number of passengers on all 4 hijacked planes. They were not victims of terrorism. They were victims of the fear of it. They ran from the thing they were afraid of, and for many of them, that very fear caught up with them on the road. Gigerenzer gave the pattern a name: dread risk. We do not run from what is dangerous. We run from what is vivid. And sometimes we run straight into the thing that was more likely to kill us all along. The fear you feel when the cabin shakes is not evidence of danger. It is evidence of safety. A plane crash haunts your imagination for one reason only. It is rare enough to be news, rare enough to be a story, rare enough that a single one echoes around the planet for weeks. The 40,000 road deaths a year have no such echo. They are too ordinary to remember, which makes the road feel safe, which is exactly what makes it dangerous. For millions of years, your intuition learned to judge danger by the stories told around the fire. And right now, it is doing exactly what it learned to do. It is just that the world changed, and the stories stopped matching the odds. Flying did not become safe by accident. It became safe because it is the one place where humanity decided that every single death would be studied, understood, and answered. A century of lessons, each one paid for, none of them wasted. When you buckle that seatbelt, you are not gambling. You are stepping into the most carefully corrected system human beings have ever built. So the next time you are in seat 23A and the floor drops for half a second, let your hand grip the armrest. That is fine. That is an old reflex doing its old job, and it does not need to be argued with. But then look out the window. Somewhere below you, threaded across the dark, are the tiny lit veins of the highways, and that is where the real risk lives. Patient and ordinary and completely unphotographed. You will rejoin it at the taxi rank, and that will be fine too. For now, you are 7 miles up, held aloft by every lesson aviation ever learned the hard way. The cabin hums. The strangers around you sleep. Statistically speaking, you may never be this safe again until your next flight.